IU fans, what? Just another ho-hum week. Indiana knocks out a couple teams in the Big Ten. Everything's fine. No one cares. It's smooth sailing. I mean, what? Purdue, number one, done. Hoosiers beat them. Rutgers, 6 straight wins against IU. Bang, done. Indiana beats them. Who expected to see Indiana in second place in the Big Ten just a few weeks ago? But that's exactly where IU is. And we're going to talk about Indiana's wonderful stretch of play here, the pretty impressive win over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, and so much more here on episode 283 of the Hoosier Sound, where we're the official podcast of Indiana HQ, recording this episode of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday, February 9th, 2023, where I am your host, Nathan Krishnan. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. So maybe music to the ears of some of you, but I'm a little bit under the weather, so you may hear a little bit less from me tonight and a little bit more from Matt. We're going to have a little bit of a shorter episode in general because Indiana's win over Purdue was covered in our emergency podcast episode, which you should go find if you have not listened to it already. But Matt, IU, of course, takes down number one Purdue on Saturday on Cloud 9. Everyone's celebrating as they should. But what's different this year compared to last year's, the Hoosiers backed it up with another big win at home, this time against Rutgers compared to the Michigan loss last year. What were the big takeaways from you after that IU 66-60 win? What are the main storylines you wanted to talk about? Because there's a lot you can pick from.
Yeah, there's so many you can pick from this game. I would say the one that stands out to me the most is probably the most obvious one, and that's Trayce Jackson-Davis's continues his dominance of Big Ten and Big Ten big specifically. 20, 18, and 6 on 8 of 14 from the floor. I mean, there's not really much you can ask for from him. He contributed a block in there as well.
On Omori, right? Cliff Omori is a great defensive center.
Omori is good, and Rutgers as a whole plays really good defense, and Indiana basically suffocated them to the point where they couldn't score for large stretches of that game on defense, and then offensively just did enough to win the game. Some interesting contributions if you look at the minutes played. Starting lineup played basically 30 minutes apiece outside of Race Thompson. Malik Renew played 14 minutes. Tar Bates chipped in 9, and then Caleb Banks and Geronimo played like one rotation each, right? Like one segment each. They each got like 4 minutes. Yeah, Geronimo got a minute.
Yeah.
Just to kind of see how they would both do. I would say the secondary biggest thing from this game other than Trayce was the one that sticks out off the scouting report and the box score is Miller Kopp.
Yeah.
Who's 4 of 6 from 3, 6 of 9 from the floor, chipped in 18 points, had 2 steals, 2 assists. Like he had
hallelujah.
His points were bigger than 18 though. I think
I agree.
18 on the score sheet seems like that's would be important, but he was the reason why Indiana eventually ended up winning this game and winning it kind of comfortably. After Rutgers got it close, and that was because just timely 3-pointers, just timely shots. What didn't force anything, just kind of took what was there. If I had one gripe with him, it's he needs to work on his technical free throws because he just seems to miss the front end of the 1-1 technical free throws every single time.
The one on Tuesday was the flop. It was just one. You can only get one shot on the flop technical. He missed that one too. But overall, yeah, we can't complain about Miller Kopp once again.
There's really nothing to complain. And again, this team is playing better defense. Defensive numbers are picking up. They're still shooting about 40% from 3. They were 5 of 12 this game, which is surprisingly 41%.
There you go.
45% from the floor. They're shooting above 70% from the free throw line. Again, Mike Woodson has done not a special job, but he's done an above average job kind of turning the season around from where it was after the Penn State game. Right? Because we were all doom and gloom after the Penn State game. Indiana has now gone on to win 7 out of their last 8. Their only loss coming against Maryland on the road. And now you have
And yeah,
two winnable away games in a row. I expect them to drop one of them, but two winnable away games in a row with a chance to push it out to maybe even 9 out of 10 wins, which would be insane. Rutgers is a really good team. I fully expect them to actually probably beat and bounce back and beat Illinois
me too.
in their next game that they play, which will make Indiana's win look even better. I don't know why the rankings or the top 25 AP voters decide to always rank Rutgers right before they have a tough stretch of play for them to just drop out of the rankings and be completely underrated by the rest of the country. Last thing I will say about this game, it wasn't Jalen Hood-Schifino's most pretty game. He had one of maybe the coolest baskets I've ever seen
Yeah.
from an IU player, but I thought he was again like a game changer for this team just because he was a threat every time he touched the ball to either create for himself or create for others. And that was not something that was originally the case to start the year. He's grown a lot. We're going to talk about here in a bit about adding Xavier Johnson back because it's getting closer and closer to the time that he should be coming back from his injury. And it's going to be tricky for the staff to work in somebody like Xavier Johnson because while
Seriously.
Xavier Johnson is the second best player on this team, he needs the ball, right? And so again, that takes the ball away from Jalen Hood-Schifino. It takes the ball away from Trey Galloway, who I thought had a pretty good game. It takes the ball away from guys that have been contributing heavily since he left and since he had his injury, but also have been growing significantly since he left. Will that growth continue when he comes back? How's the chemistry going to work? These are all questions that we can kind of we're not
Yeah.
going to have the answers for you, but we can kind of do our best our best guesses as to what it will look like. And we'll get
Yeah.
that here in a bit.
Because the question is, how do you make sure that these players, when they return, specifically Xavier Johnson and Jordan Geronimo, how do you make sure that they add value to your team? You can add Logan Duncombe to that question too, especially if you draw a team in the Big Ten tournament that has some big guys, which there are a handful of those in the top 25. That's where the case is. How do you make sure you add value? We're going to talk about that. As far as Rutgers, I also do think Rutgers will beat Illinois because I don't think the Big Ten will suspend Paul Mulcahy for tripping Trace Jackson Davis at the end of the game. I guess we're just going to be okay with that. I would be shocked if they came down with the decision on Friday. We're recording on Thursday night, but that was a Bush League play. I lost a lot of respect for Paul Mulcahy after seeing him do that on video. And then he went out to delete his Twitter account. I mean, at least in the 80s, when people trip people, they backed it up. They defended themselves. They were like, this is my brand. I'm a bad guy. I'm the villain. And Mulcahy just copped out. So I guess that's going to be how he plays things. Whatever. It's fine. TJD and Kopp were amazing on Tuesday night. And, Jackson Davis led the way. Obviously, the historic basket with the 2,000 career points. First ever Hoosier, 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds. He passed Yogi Ferrell on the all-time scoring list. He had some incredible sound bites to Big Ten Network after the game, to the media after the game, talked about it being a blessing to play at Indiana. And he talked in detail about the kind of improvements he's made. He said, yeah, I've been consistent, but, the teammates have helped me out. Passing has gotten better. The competitive edge has gotten better. The leadership has become part of it as you get more experience. Jackson Davis, the numbers, you almost accept them just casually at this. I mean, 20.18, 6 assists. Like, he is single-handedly dominating these games, and you're seeing Indiana's 3-point percentage reflect that as well. You soak the pressure, you kick the passes out, and Trey Galloway, Miller, Kopp, Jalen Hood-Schifino, when you think back to the Ohio State game, these guys are hitting the threes when they get the looks. Tamar Bates had a nice three-pointer early in that Rutgers game too. Hit one against Purdue as well. Exactly what you want to see out of Indiana. It's a humming machine. I did not expect to be saying that. Indiana is a humming machine right now. And frankly, if they played with this team and they played these minutes the rest of the way, I'm not sure how many games Indiana would lose. I really don't know. I mean, the way these guys are healthy right now and the way they're playing together, connected basketball. And I even saw Race Thompson once again make some clutch plays at the end of that game to seal the deal against Rutgers. Really, really nice to see. Overall, Indiana in a good spot right now. Two interesting games coming up. Matt, obviously, everyone is high on this Indiana team right now. There are a lot of folks who have put Indiana as a 4 seed. Usually, you see Indiana right now listed as a 5. We're talking about Big Ten tournament. Indiana, again, as we talked about, second place in the Big Ten. We've been very complimentary about Indiana. I'm so happy Miller Kopp's taking more shots. I'm so happy he scored 18 points. I want to see it continue, especially in that Northwestern game, which takes place next week. But let's look at the other side of the ledger for just a minute. Okay, out of it's been great. In 7 of 8, a lot of good wins here over the last few weeks. What are the 1 or 2 issues that stand out to you right now from an IU standpoint? Because they're not flawless, but what are the 1 or 2 things that stand out to you right now that Indiana can get better
at? Rebounding. Indiana gave up so many second chance opportunities against Rutgers. Rutgers is a good rebounding team, but again, they out rebounded Rutgers, but they had 11 offensive rebounds, just way too many.
Not good enough. Especially when you're ahead the whole way,
enough.
right? When you're leading, you want to make sure you get the stop, get the defensive board, and get back on offense.
Yeah. So again, that needs to cut out. They also had 14 turnovers. Getting that down around 10 probably helps. And then they foul a lot. This game, they actually won the foul battle. They fouled less than Rutgers somehow. But usually Indiana ends up putting teams in the double bonus by, the under 8. And that just can't be a thing come March, because plenty of the teams that you're going to play are going to be good free throw shooting teams, or you'll get certain players that you need in foul trouble. Again, and that just comes down to being fundamentally sound on the defensive end, and also not putting yourself in positions where it causes officials to make calls that probably shouldn't be making. And that's harder to do than just to say that. But there's certain things that you can do to sorry, my dad walked in. There's certain things you can do to stop those opportunities from happening. For instance, if you're on a fast break opportunity and somebody's going up for a layup and there's no way in heck that you're going to get the layup, don't touch him.
Yeah,
right? Just don't touch him. Accept the L. Other times is there's plenty of times I've seen Geronimo specifically do this. Somebody's going in for a layup, kind of gets an open lane, maybe he beats Miller Kopp off the bounce. And he just kind of touches him very lightly as he goes up, and then just gives the officials the chance to call it a foul, even though it really probably didn't inhibit the offensive player at all in getting a bucket. But just there's little mental mistakes that Indiana does, that every basketball team does, is something that they can fix going forward.
And that's a reason for optimism, even further optimism for Indiana, because if Indiana was playing almost perfect basketball, hitting 60% of their threes and not turning the ball over and not committing any fouls, and everyone was healthy, then you'd say, well, this is the top of the line for the Hoosiers, the top of the curve for the Hoosiers, I should say. But when you see it this way, okay, there are areas where Indiana can get better, Indiana can improve. I think defensively, while they're showing strides on that side of the court, I still thought they had a couple of issues in that Rutgers game, a couple issues in the Purdue game of recognizing their matchups in real time. There were a couple times where we said, oh my God, Cam Spencer, how can you keep leaving him open for shots? Oscar Palmquist, yeah, I know he's a seldom used player, but of course Rutgers had the Mo Mag injury. Palmquist comes in, gets a little more playing time, and Indiana needed a couple of possessions, maybe even 4 or 5 possessions, to really realize the threat that he brought to the table. So, you want to make sure going forward here, again, the games remaining, tighten those things up. If you can do that, you can continue building on the progress that you've made so far. Per KenPom, Indiana's projected as of Thursday night to finish 21-10 on the season, 12-8 in Big Ten play. A lot of interesting matchups coming up the rest of the way in Big Ten play. There are no Minnesotas on your schedule, no Nebraska's on your schedule, no Wisconsin's on your schedule. So the good games are coming fast and furious here. 4 on the road, 3 at home, and you can look analytically and say the easiest of the 7 remaining Big Ten games is Senior Day against Michigan at home. And so it's going to, the tough matchups will be coming fast and furious. We're going to dive into Michigan a little bit later on in this podcast episode. Have no fear. But first, it is time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And we have to tip our cap, as usual, to the IU women's basketball team, who continue taking down their opponents in dominant fashion. How about their wins last week at Minnesota and at Purdue, each by over 20 points, to vault to number 2 in the country, a program high. And of course, everyone, I love seeing the social media interaction, is plugged in to Indiana's home game against number 5 Iowa right now. It looks like the score is tied at 19 after the first quarter. It's taking place as we are recording. And you know that on our next podcast episode, we will be saluting the Hoosiers, win or loss, as Iowa is an outstanding opponent. Caitlin Clark, one of my favorite college basketball players to watch in either the men's or the women's game, an absolute spectacular basketball player in her own right. Indiana and Iowa potentially could face each other 3 times in the next 7 games, depending on how the Big Ten tournament works out. So keep an eye out for that. Potentially a 4th matchup, maybe in the Final 4. We'll see what happens. Folks, a reminder, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at IndianaHQ and at the Hoosier Sound. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans, such as yourself, especially at this time of year where there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. Matt, here's the deal, right? So Indiana's gone out now, 17-7. Big Ten play, the Big Ten record has sorted itself out. Indiana 8-5 in conference play right now, 2nd in the league. This was kind of how last season was going. And then a bunch of guys got suspended before the Northwestern game. And the Hoosiers season hit the skids. And Indiana needed a real impressive run in the Big Ten tournament to play their way in the field. Yep. My question to you is this. Is this peak Indiana right now? Or do you think there's still better basketball to come from the Hoosiers standpoint? Because, they've shown a lot of good play recently. Is this as good as it gets, or can they keep getting better?
Oh, they can absolutely keep getting better. That's not even a question. Again, you're missing your 2nd leading scorer from last year, and your only pure point guard. Again, so that's that in itself is just like another 20% you can add to the team. I think that there's, I think Tamar Bates could probably play better. I think Miller Kopp can be more consistent. I think Jalen Hood-Schifino can grow some more.
Yeah.
I think Brace Thompson's playing at 45%.
Yeah. He's still hurt. Like,
he's still clearly hurt, by the way. He's clearly hurt.
He's clearly hurt.
He's not 100%. Or not even, he's not even close to like passing. I don't even think he's close to 70% still. And again, he's had back-to-back games where he's just been bad, but had really important plays.
Yes.
And that is why he plays. And that's why he gets minutes. Cause I saw a lot of people like, why is Woodson running Brace Thompson instead of Renew? And it's like the little things he does, whether it's, inbounding the ball correctly or getting a steal or a deflection here or there. Like, it's those little things that end up winning basketball games that don't stand out in the stat sheet.
And then I think he hit 2 free throws at the end of
He's hit a bunch of club. He's hit a
clutch one against Purdue.
He hit 2 against Purdue and he hits 2 against Rutgers. That's why he's in the game and not a freshman. Anyways, and so he'll probably play against Michigan. So yeah, there's plenty of room for this team to grow. Again, they're missing that second post threat that Race was when he was healthy. Because you used to be able to throw it down low to Trace, and if he was doubled, then you just give it over to Race, and Race gets a bucket. Xavier Johnson, same thing. If he's you can just give him the ball and he can make something for himself. Again, all this stuff is like a dynamic this team has been missing since both those guys have been injured. And with about 7 games left of the regular season, you have plenty of time to work these guys back in. Again, it is February 9th. So you have just under a month until you have the Big Ten tournament. Or I think it's like almost exactly a month until the Big Ten tournament to work these guys back and get them ready for a hopefully deep run in March.
And that's the question that we raised just a moment ago on this podcast. What's the best way Mike Woodson can integrate Xavier Johnson and Jordan Geronimo back into the lineup? And what you saw was on Tuesday night, Geronimo got a minute. Woodson made a comment to Don Fisher after the game, basically saying, look, Geronimo hasn't practiced that much, but he needs the game minutes. And I can see how Jordan Geronimo is someone who's a better game player than a practice player, because he really does help the Hoosiers on the court in game situations as far as the energy and the athleticism and making sure the ball is doing what it has to do. He's in the right spot. He grabs those key rebounds. He gets those key deflections to disrupt defensive possessions. I can see how Geronimo needs the game experience to return from injury. And Xavier Johnson is someone here over the next 7 games you can absolutely, easily transition back into his role here. Now, I think what will be interesting is, if you say that Xavier Johnson is someone who deserves 30 minutes a game in the NCAA tournament, you got to find 30 minutes to take out from whether it's one player or multiple players. And let me try asking you that question, Matt, because look, there's no certainty as to when Johnson returns, but when he does, you're not going to bring him back to play 5 minutes.
Nope.
How do you think Indiana makes that work? It's going to be a tough choice for Woodson and the staff.
Yeah, it is. I think, again, he'll probably start with getting about 10 minutes per game just to kind of get back into it. That's like 2 segments, basically, 4-minute segments that he'll probably play. And I expect it to be maybe a game or 2, and then I think he'll be back to his full minutes fairly shortly after that, because again, he's so important to this team, and a lot. Some people would think, oh, you're taking game time away from Jalen Hood-Schifino. No, I don't think this is time for Jalen Hood-Schifino that's being taken away. I think this is more of eating into Trey Galloway's minutes, maybe even a little bit of Miller Kopp's. Because again, those guys, both of them on the court at the same time, was so dynamic for this team to begin the year. It's the reason why you basically ran over North Carolina. You won at Xavier. Again, those guys had a really good dynamic, and actually was part of the reason why Indiana even came back in that Arizona game.
Oh yeah.
Was those 2 guys. So again, Indiana needs Xavier Johnson, and I don't really care whose minutes he has to take, because he's that important. I don't want the staff to rush him back. And I want him to be closer to 100% than what Race Thompson is right now.
So let's look at that Xavier game, right? Just for one example. In that game, Jackson Davis played 37 minutes. That's not changing, right? Okay, that's Jalen Hood-Schifino played 29. I think that's a fair number. Miller Kopp played 28. Okay, all right. Trey Galloway got 23. Race Thompson got 22. Xavier Johnson got 29.
That sounds about right.
Renew 16, Bates 11, Geronimo 5. Everyone else were up close and personal witnesses. That's, I think, how this thing eventually works itself out. It's going to be tough to explain to someone like Caleb Banks that, hey, look, you got to be ready when called upon. And the same deal with Logan Duncombe, the same deal with CJ Gunn. You got to be ready when called upon. But look, this is money time. I mean, this is jackpot time, and
Yeah.
you gotta ride your horses to the finish line. At this point, you're seeing Michigan do some of that right now. That Juwan Howard earlier in the season played a bunch of guys and tried to figure things out and try to work things out. But now, money time, especially with Michigan's backs against the wall as far as NCAA tournament, you're seeing him really cut down his rotation. So, all of us, it'll be interesting to see how exactly Indiana works out the minutes distribution when Johnson returns. We're not sure when that happens yet. Jordan Geronimo again. He got a minute against Rutgers on Tuesday night. In these road games where the crowd may be just a little bit flat because you're not 17,000 Hoosier craziness fanatics in the building. That's exactly the kind of situation where Jordan Geronimo could be helpful. We'll see how Woodson and the staff deal with this going forward.
Right.
We're going to talk about Michigan in just a sec. First, time for a social media shout out. Saw a number of Hoosiers get traded across the NBA earlier this afternoon. Interestingly, none of them were OG Anunoby, but hey, Eric Gordon now
Thomas Bryant
with the Clippers, Thomas Bryant off Denver. Make sure you follow them if you have not already, to follow their path across the NBA. Both teams now, both players now that we just mentioned, Gordon and Bryant, very much in the thick of a potential Western Conference champ with either the Clippers or with the Denver Nuggets. I also wanted to give a shout out to Joe Tooney, who is a guard on the Kansas City Chiefs. Tooney, who of course will be in the Super Bowl coming up here on Sunday, is part of the Kelly School of Business MBA program that works with former NFL players or current NFL players to help them get a graduate degree either during or after their professional career. So Tooney is going to take his role onto the field during the Super Bowl as an offensive lineman for Kansas City, former New England Patriot, current Kansas City Chief. A little bit of an IU tie there as you're looking to maybe look for someone to root for in the Super Bowl on Sunday between the Chiefs and the Eagles. Matt will tell you the truth for the Eagles.
Yep.
Folks, our socials, you can find us at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. On Instagram, Matt, we're at Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
Exactly. That's where you can find us on Instagram. If you've already followed us, just tell a friend, shout it out, maybe just yell it out into the void, and that could potentially help someone who is a passionate IU fan follow us as well.
That's true.
All right. Michigan, Ann Arbor, Chrysler Center, Saturday evening, prime time-ish, maybe not quite, 6 p.m., ESPN tip, Kevin Brown and Robbie Hummel on the call. The Hoosiers and the Wolverines will do battle. Michigan with a decent 8-5 record in conference play, but the Wolverines are 14-10 on the season. Now, they do have 3 straight wins. They did beat Northwestern on the road. Pretty decent accomplishment, all things considered, before following it up with home wins against Ohio State as well as Nebraska. That also does mean, yes, in a bit of a scheduling quirk, this will be Michigan's 3rd straight home game in Big Ten play. The Wolverines are on the outside looking in right now as far as NCAA tournament consideration. They are very poor as far as their quad 1 record. They are 2-8 in those games. And what doesn't help their cause is they have a quad 2 neutral loss to Arizona State, a quad 4 home loss to Central Michigan. They need every big win that they can get. Now, KenPom has the Hoosiers winning this one 75-74. Matt, from your end, the Wolverines have obviously been a pretty strong team in the Big Ten over the last decade or so. But right now, they're in a situation that we're familiar with, trying to scramble together big quad 1 wins here in February to get back onto the right side of the bubble.
Michigan is very mid. Michigan, yes. They're playing their best basketball right now, which should be good news to Michigan fans. But Michigan as a team is just not that great. They're not very well put together. So everybody knows the big man, Hunter Dickinson, Mr. Podcaster, like myself, a podcast connoisseur.
He's one of us. We are like college basketball players, man.
Yeah, exactly. I am Hunter Dickinson. Today I feel like Hunter Dickinson. No, yeah. So he plays. Well, he is basically their entire team. Him and Jet Howard. So Jet Howard, if you don't know, Jet is the son of Jawan, Michigan's coach. Freshman, probably will be a first round pick. Where in the lottery goes, I don't know, but he'll be a lottery pick for sure. Both of them good shooters, can shoot the three. I think Jet and Hunter average about 33 points a game combined between the two of them. And then the next best player is Kobe Buffkin, another guard that's getting some NBA, some draft buzz, especially after his recent performances. He's kind of stepped it up. And then other than that, they kind of have a bit of a how do I put this? They have a bit of a ragtag cast of characters. You see Terrace Reed, former 4-star recruit freshman that comes in, plays minutes. Joey Baker, transfer from Duke, who comes in and he's their like lights out 3-point shooter. You have Terrence Williams, who will start, and every Michigan fan somehow despises in some way, because he's just very frustrating to watch. I think the best way to describe him to IU fans, he's like if Justin Smith only wanted to take 3-pointers. Because again, he's like a 6'6", 6'7" forward that looks like he should be like super powerful inside and super athletic, but only does finesse stuff. So he's very frustrating to watch. He will hit threes though. He'll take a lot of them though. So every three he takes is a good thing for IU. Will Cheddar, my guy Ant Wright, his favorite player because he's actually Michigan plays good with him in the lineup and not good when they have Terrence Williams. So Michigan fans have been clamoring for Will Cheddar to play. If he plays a bunch of minutes, Indiana's probably going to have a tougher game than if Jawan decides to not play him. And then finally, the last player that will play is Jace Howard, the son of the coach again, his other son. And he's much more of a defensive presence, if anything. He also shoots the three, but not very efficiently. So again, he kind of reminds me a lot of Zach McRoberts as a former IU player because he's just a really good defensive player, but can't really contribute much on the offensive end. So you have this ragtag group of players that plays. There's other players that Jawan will rotate in and out, but those are the main sort of guys that will play. I expect IU to have trouble guarding Jet Howard. He's a guy that's carved up much better defenses than Indiana. However, I have a feeling, especially given IU's performance against Michigan in the Big Ten tournament last year, that Indiana's going to kind of have their way with the rest of the matchups on the floor. Kobe Buffkin, Doug McDaniel, both really young guards. Indiana has, I think that Jalen Hood-Schifino is a better guard than both of those guys. And honestly, that's not like they're super fast. They're not going to be able to break down Indiana's perimeter defense very well. So again, this is a team that I think matches up very well with Indiana. So I want to hear your thoughts, Nathan, because I want to see if you agree with me, because I don't know if you've watched the games, but I've basically watched every Michigan basketball game this year. And so I can tell you that I have a feeling that this game will be close because it's played in Ann Arbor, but when this game is played at home at IU, I fully expect this game to be very IU.
Yeah, I mean, I already know for Indiana's last game of the regular season against Michigan, I'm going to pick Indiana. But in this one, I've watched a lot of Michigan this year. Absolutely. They are very different now than they were like 2 months ago, right? Like I watched them play against Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Arizona State, in those early games this year. Where they're completely different. I saw them crush Pitt by 30. I did. I remember exactly where it was a weeknight game. I watched said, "Oh, Michigan Pitt, interesting. Michigan won by 30. Pitt's not bad."
Yep.
And if I'm Mike Woodson and if I'm Kenya Hunter and if I'm Brian Walsh, or you see a Roseman, I disregard all the film from like November and December. It's just like
Mhm.
it's fairly insignificant to me at this point. It's interesting if you ask a lot of people, you know, where's like Hunter Dickinson in the Big Ten. I feel like he's really fallen under the radar just based on how Edey and Jackson
Mm,
Davis have been this year. Indiana can't take him lightly. You know, you
right.
almost have to approach this matchup against Dickinson like you're facing Zach Edey, and think about all the attention in the buildup to Indiana Purdue last Saturday. Zach Edey, Trace Jackson, Zach Edey, Trace Jackson, Zach Edey, Trace Jackson. We're not hearing as much about that right now, right? With Hunter
Mm,
Dickinson, and I think that's a little bit of a trap that Indiana could potentially fall into. With
exactly.
that said,
Yep.
Michigan is unranked for a good reason. They're not great. I'm not sure how confident they should be with wins against an Ohio State team that seems to have quit on their season. I mean, I think they'll be Northwestern tonight, but an Ohio State team is clearly a bottom four team in the Big Ten. And, you know, Nebraska, how excited can you really get over a home win over Nebraska? With that said, Michigan is a team that does not turn it over much. They're decent as far as the foul game is concerned. They
Right.
don't put teams on the line too much. They don't go to the line too much either. They play with pace. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Indiana is going to do here. The one hangup to me is the fact that there is no question. And if you're looking at this on paper, Michigan State should be the much more, I'm sorry, Michigan should be the much more desperate team.
Yep.
Right? That's the team with the season on the line. That's the team with a coach that maybe is trying to convince his naysayers that he belongs in the college game. That's a
Mm,
program where the fans are trying to really latch on to something. You know, to me, Michigan should be the more desperate team. However, if you go back and look at some of their losses, it's the superstars that step up and dominate. When Michigan
yep.
lost at Michigan State, at Iowa, I should say, it was Chris Murray going for something like 26. When Michigan went to Maryland and lost, Jameer Young went for a big number.
Mm,
Zach Edey didn't have an insane game, but he still put up 19 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 blocks when Purdue beat Michigan. When
right.
Michigan went to Penn State in their last loss, Jalen Pickett went absolutely insane. So let me do some simple deducing here, Matt. Sounds like Trace Jackson Davis and maybe Jalen Hood have to step up for IU. As we talked about just a moment ago, Ken Pom has IU taking this one 75-74. Who do you have winning this game and by how much?
I have IU winning this game. I do think again IU matched up very well against them. Trace had success against Hunter Dickinson in the past. Um, especially in the most previous game in which they've played. I have a feeling that Indiana's going to win this probably 72-65. It'll be a little bit closer than the final score, but I still fully expect Indiana to come out and put out a good performance. It's been a couple games actually since Indiana um, won on the road. The last road game they lost, and then they beat Minnesota in what was a nail biter.
Not a good,
Um,
not a great performance.
no, that's probably the worst performance Indiana put up all
Here,
year outside of the Northwestern game. I was like
it's,
Northwestern and Minnesota are both terrible.
yeah.
Um, you ended up getting a win in one of them at least. So again, Indiana, I think wins this game. I think they win it. Not comfortably, but they win it, and that's all that really matters. Iowa, because I'm watching the Iowa IU game. The Michigan team is extremely good at playing up or down to the opponent. So I fully expect them to do that. I would say the key for Michigan, if they want to win the game, is for them to hit outside shots when Joey Baker is a presence, when Jet Howard is unconscious, when Hunter Dickinson is actually getting his outside shot to fall. That is when Michigan is at their best. And they are absolutely terrible to watch if it's not falling. So again, college basketball is a bit of a make or miss game, right? But for Michigan, it's like it's almost to its extreme, right? Where Michigan looks like one of the worst teams in the conference when they're not making shots from the outside, and when they make shots, they look like they could probably play with anybody in the conference. And that's why it's probably so frustrating to be a Michigan basketball fan right now. But I feel like Indiana's done a pretty good job at limiting people's 3-point looks, especially in the most recent wins. I think they did a good job against Purdue, especially against the young guards. Same kind of thing here. The only thing I would say I'm a little bit scared about is that Indiana does like to give up dribble penetration, and has struggled with that this year. And Doug McDaniels, their
Daniel,
freshman point guard,
singular,
yeah,
singular.
McDaniels, sorry, Doug McDaniels, their freshman point guard, is extremely fast. So therefore, he's the one guy on their entire roster I think can get a decent look um, of at creating for their team, and creating for others. And Jet Howard is more of a scorer himself, a pure scorer, so he's going to create for himself. But I would be worried about Doug McDaniel if I'm anything. Kobe Buffkin's pretty good too, but I have a feeling Indiana is going to put on a fantastic performance on Saturday.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's one of the differences, right? We talk about, hey, why is Michigan's older game film maybe not as helpful here? Well, Jalen Llewellyn was Michigan's point guard at the start of the year. He
Yep.
hurt his knee. Doug McDaniel has taken over in that role since. You're seeing Kobe Buffkin distribute the ball a little bit more as of late. You're just a very different team right now. When I look at this game, I'm actually a little. I'm going to have Indiana fall to Michigan in this game on Saturday, to the Wolverines. I'm going to have Michigan taking this one 80-78. I think it's going to be close. I think it'll be interesting. At the end of the day, Michigan is going, if you ask me, this is a Michigan team that's going to do everything in their power to make the NCAA tournament. And we've seen Indiana with the shoe on the other foot in previous years where a good team comes into Bloomington, and, you can even point to maybe Purdue last season coming into Bloomington, Indiana sort of figuring out, mustering something together and finding a win, right? And knocking
Right.
off a number 3 Purdue team last season. It's a similar situation for me here. Indiana is really good when they give up under 80 points. And Michigan's one of those teams that I actually think on a good night can put up 80 points. And I think that's what happens here. I don't think Michigan wins this game if it's in the 60s. So if you see it going that direction, it's a really good sign for Indiana. But if you're seeing one of these games where Indiana's a little sloppy in guarding the perimeter, where they're a little bit loose as far as their transition defense, and Michigan's on track to putting up a number in the high 70s or the 80s, that's the kind of recipe I think that leads to a Michigan win. At the same time, in a close game, Michigan's pretty good at the free throw line. And if it comes down to a situation like that, I think the Wolverines can make Indiana pay as well. It's not the end of the world. If Indiana falls in a game like this, the road games Indiana has on their schedule aren't going to be easy. So we'll see how this plays out Saturday night. One thing you did mention earlier, Matt, as far as Indiana's perimeter defense, interesting note from Tuesday, Rutgers shot 6 of 11 from 3 in the first half, but Indiana adjusted, and Rutgers only shot 2 of 14 from 3 in the second half. So kind of interesting to see how that worked back on Tuesday night in Assembly Hall. But you think about this game, 6 p.m. start, should be a good crowd in Ann Arbor. I have Indiana falling. I hope I'm wrong when we do this all again on Monday night before the Hoosiers take on Northwestern. So, Matt, as we wind down here, February 9th, so much going on in college basketball, men's and women's. What are your final thoughts as we wrap up? Anything that stand out to you that we may not have touched on yet, or you want to just preach to the choir about anything going on this planet?
Yeah. What I would say is one, if you're listening to this podcast and you only follow for the men's team, you should definitely follow the women's team. Right now, currently we're recording this podcast. It is halftime, 39-39, all top 5 matchup for IU. So you should definitely go check that out. And make sure you watch their next game because I think they play Ohio State
Yep.
this weekend as well.
Monday night.
Monday night. Monday night. They play Ohio State. And then I would also recommend that you buckle up and get ready because IU down the stretch. It's got some only 3 home games and 4 away games, and it's tough to win the league. And I don't want to see people saying the sky is falling because you lose away at Michigan after beating Rutgers and Purdue in back-to-back games. It's not, it wouldn't be the end of the world.
No.
However, that would be the worst loss that Indiana's had all year. So that wouldn't be fantastic. But I have a feeling that the way the winds are blowing for the program, that Indiana will prevail on Saturday. So make sure you're ready and watching the game. And if you want to come hang out with us, Nathan and I both hang out in playback.
Shout it out.
Yeah. And we're probably gonna hang out in Ant Wright's playback, the Michigan playback. So probably have a ton of people in there on Saturday for the Michigan IU game. If you want to, make sure you have that ready. I would go into the playback app, that's playback.tv, and sign in. If you want to just, show up randomly during the game, follow me on Twitter. I think my Twitter handle is in the Zoom right now. And follow my Twitter.
Lukens 101.
Yeah, so follow my Twitter, and then I will tweet out the link right before the game goes live, and you can watch along with us and kind of type in the chat and maybe even come up on stage and talk to us. So yeah, that's it for me. And yeah,
man, I mean, every night it feels like there's something exciting going on in the world of college basketball. What wasn't exciting, in all seriousness, not to bring the mood down too much, is seeing Rob Finney get hurt once again for Cincinnati. Shout out Rob. That's what I'm going to end with. Obviously, someone who gave IU fans a lot of really exciting moments to cheer about. Just tough to see him. He has no more eligibility left. All I'm going to say is for Indiana, administrators, basketball coaches, whatever, like, invite him, open arms, get him into Assembly Hall. Indiana fans deserve to see him again.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, IU fans, that about wraps it up for our 283rd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.